Musume is admittedly a very interesting gacha game. I've never played it. Nobody I know has ever played it. The game was only available in Japan until recently, where they expanded into Korea, but somehow remained the second most popular gacha game in the entire world for almost 2 years, until losing that title to Nikke just a couple months ago. But remaining the third most popular gacha is almost as impressive, and we don't know how long Nikke will remain at number 2. But what has made the game as popular as it is? And more importantly than that, has the game been growing, or is the game in a perpetual state of decline since its release? That's what we're here today to take a look at, to see how Musume is doing in 2023 as part of my brand new Gacha in 2023 video series, utilizing a graph that I created that you can see in the background right now, that we will be subsequently including for every new episode in this series. You can find the other episodes in this series either at the end of this video or by clicking that link in the description or the pinned comment below. That way you can find out how your favorite games are holding up. Before we take a look at Musume, I want to thank every one of our patrons over on Patreon. You guys allow me to keep pushing out video after video, and I deeply appreciate all of your guys' support. Also, if you have a moment, consider following me on Twitch. I stream there every weekend. Musume, whose full name is Musume Pretty Derby, is an unusual racing simulation gacha game developed by the legendary Cygames. The premise for Musume is that popular racehorses have been reincarnated as pop icons in a parallel universe. You are their caretaker, and yeah. It is a very weird game, and I am not making any of this up. The game released in January 2021, and since then has gone on to captivate players all throughout Japan, and more recently, Korea. Although if I recall, there was quite a bit of drama surrounding it in the past months. But let's go ahead and talk numbers here, which is going to primarily consist of new players and earnings from within Japan, and then will consist of Korean and Japanese earnings and new players towards the latter half of the video. I will note, for this series I typically discuss the events that happen each month, including banners with husbandos and waifus available, because it gives us a rough gauge of why a game made as much as it did in a respective month. But this information has not been compiled and is not readily or easily available online, so I have no real way of doing that. All I have are raw downloads and earnings, so we're gonna go ahead with what we have today. Beginning with the month of January 2022, Musume had a grand total of 290,000 new players and 50 million downloads in total revenue. These are absolutely incredible numbers, a whole year after launching within Japan. Other than Genshin Impact, no other game has remained as popular as Musume has a year after releasing. February 2022 had a grand total of 270,000 new players and $43 million in total revenue. This was a very minor decline in new players and earnings, and was also expected, given January is a month where players are still technically spending after Christmas as opposed to February. March 2022 had a grand total of 280,000 new players and $63 million in total revenue. Somehow, Musume earned even more than in January 2022, and beyond that, eclipsed even Genshin Impact, becoming the #1 highest grossing game, gacha game specifically, that month. April 2022 had a grand total of 150,000 new players and $36 million in total revenue. This was admittedly quite the decline, almost half the total new players and earnings both. Granted, these numbers were still significantly higher than almost any other gacha game than Genshin at the time. May 2022 had a grand total of 120,000 new players and $43 million in total revenue. A nice increase, and yet again taking the spot of #1 most popular gacha game for yet another month. June 2022 had a grand total of 80,000 new players and $30 million in total revenue. This was admittedly its lowest point yet, falling out of the top 5 most popular gacha games this month. A sign of things to come? A potential decline that it couldn't come back from? Let's find out. July 2022 had a grand total of 330,000 new players and $57 million in total revenue between Japan and Korea. This was Korea's launch month, with Korea bringing in 250,000 new downloads and $15 million out of the total. Not a bad start. August 2022 had a grand total of 220,000 new players and $53 million in total revenue. Down from July, definitely. but only slightly. Korea was responsible for 120,000 of these new players and $13 million out of the total. September 2022 had a grand total of 100,000 new players and $41 million in total revenue. Once again, Musume has begun to decline, not due to Japan, rather due to Korea. Korea was responsible for a mere 40,000 of these new players and $5 million out of the total. October 2022 had a grand total of 65,000 new players and $33 million in total revenue, almost at their lowest point once again. Now the Korean players were no longer really interested in the game for whatever reason. Korea was responsible for only 15,000 of these new players and literally just $2 million out of that total. November 2022 had a grand total of 55,000 new players and $25 million in total revenue. This was admittedly the first time the game had ever dipped below $30 million and lost its number 2 spot once more, this time to both Nikkei and Fate Grand Order. Korea was responsible for 15,000 of these new players and $1 million out of that total. December 2022 had a grand total of 75,000 new players and $32 million in total revenue. December and January are the 2 highest grossing months of the year for video games, so its spike was expected, but it didn't achieve nearly as much as I would have anticipated it to given earlier that year. Korea was responsible for 25,000 of these new players and $4 million out of the total. January 2023 had a grand total of 90,000 new players and $42 million in total revenue. Evidently, 2023 was not nearly as good for the game as 2022 was, and unlike Arc Knights and Blue Archive, who saw their highest yearly revenue to date in January 2023, Musume is beginning to show that while still the number 4 most popular gacha game in the world, it doesn't have the potential for growth that it had earlier in 2022. Which isn't to say that this game isn't still popular, or that it's declining by a drastic margin, or that it's even remotely close to being in a troubled state, but it is no longer growing, especially in Korea, where only a few thousand new players download the game per month, and it struggles to earn $1 million in revenue. But if Musume isn't your thing, don't worry, I got you covered with 2 videos on screen right now. One featuring a list of 9 absolutely incredible looking anime gacha games releasing this year, and the other featuring a list of other gacha games that I've covered in my Gacha in 2023 series.